You know, man doesn't stand forever his nullification. Once there will be a reaction. And I see it setting in, you know, when I think of my patients, they all seek their own existence and to assure their existence against that complete atomization into nothingness or into meaninglessness. Man cannot stand a meaningless life. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was Carl Jung, an absolute titan authority figure in the world of psychology and one of the forefathers of it. And although maybe I haven't read all of his work or anything, and he's extremely he is that authority figure, I don't think he's kind of like I feel like an Einstein level in the psychology world, and we haven't really caught up to him yet. As a whole, we're still trying to digest his work because of its profundity. So if he is saying these things, that we know nothing of man and his psychology, and that it is the greatest danger, and if he's saying that, then we have a fucking problem, because if he feels that way, then God knows what we feel. And he's not wrong. All coming evil is not from the natural world or the universe. It is from ourselves. And we're at a point where we have so much power that we can't afford to make mistakes like we used to. And if that doesn't fire you up, in his words, and you can feel his words and the emotion and the seriousness behind them, even though he's an 85-year-old man there, if they don't get you fired up to try to figure out and learn more of the male, or the human, psyche, and understand ourselves better, then I don't know what would. So, let's get into the book. I want to try to summarize the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover book. Now, if you find this interesting, definitely go and read it. It's not that long, and although it's extremely complex, and with any kind of Jungian psychoanalysis, anything like this, it's extremely complicated, but the book was very easy to read. This is because I think archetypes in their nature are so deeply embedded in our own minds that once we hear them articulated, it's not that hard to understand, and we can think of countless examples of these in movies and stories and in ourselves, that it comes quite easily, I think. So, the King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover patterns that are understood as the four main building blocks or principles of the male mature psyche. They live in a dynamic relationship with each other. It's not that there is just one present in your mind or the other. It's you have all of these structures living inside your psyche, and they are at play with one another, and also take on different positive ideal forms and also their negative counterparts or shadow aspects. This book is trying to serve as an operator's manual or a map of the territories of the male psyche. I wish, of course, it won't be a perfect explanation of exactly how you can become a man if you're a boy, and after reading this book you'll be so manly and masculine and you won't have to worry about anything. No, of course, this is just, they are laying out a problem and also a map of what they think this psyche constitutes, so that we can then go ourselves on this task of reaching the fullest masculine potential that we can. And of course, we need to do this. It is not because most men these days are staying boys, and this is extremely bad for ourselves, but also everyone else. Because the most dangerous man is a weak man, and the weak men are suffering from boy psychology, immature masculinity. And as well as the king, warrior, magician, lover, there is also the immature counterparts that you have to go through as a child, but people aren't ever getting out of them. And they go into a number of reasons why this is. I won't go into all of them, but a couple are, for example, the ritual processes that normally undertook traditional or ancient cultures, of where they would take boys in a sacred space or a ritual process and turn them into men through that, or at least try to. We no longer have these rituals. Also, the disintegration of the traditional family structure. Lots of children being raised without a mother or a father. So yes, the disintegration of the traditional family units, which, like anything in evolution, it's like, I don't know why they're there, but they have evolved that way for whatever reason, that they're the most, they work. Like, we haven't got this far as a species by luck. So whatever things, not everything, of course we can't always stay the same, but certain things like the traditional structure of a family unit in humans is probably there for a good reason, to say the least. Another reason that this is happening is that the modern critique of certain feminist ideologies, and I don't want to get too much into that, and I don't have any resentment for those critiques. In fact, I think those critiques in large part are correct, and they were necessary to happen, because it's, well, yes, of course, like, men aren't being the best they could and are doing terrible things. That seems about fair, but the male gender in itself is not evil. There is, like, it's not this evil patriarchy. So it seems to have become a somewhat vicious cycle where it maybe was critiquing, and that critiquing is good and necessary, but at the same time it's also causing men to do more of the terrible things they're being critiqued of. It's kind of like a vicious cycle. On the one hand, like, are those critiques set out to help men become better? I think in principle they are, but a lot of the time it seems to be a more bitter and toxic, where it's making them worse. Anyway, a lot of the things actually being critiqued that they lay out in this book aren't the mature forms of masculinity. I don't think it's, in principle, it's not possible to critique the highest ideal of the masculine archetypes, because they are good not only for the individual male, but also for everyone around him. There is nothing in, like, obviously they can go wrong, and you will see that later, but the ideal version of it is a no-brainer. It's good for everyone, and we desperately need them. And a lot of the things being critiqued, and a lot of the things thought of as masculine by men and also females, aren't even these mature forms. They're the immature forms, these threatening or hostile or controlling aspects that are often critiqued are all forms of the immature boy psychology. And it's up to men to reach a mature psychological level. I don't even think it's a choice. We desperately need this, and we can feel that. Where a lot of males are extremely unhappy with themselves, and well, this is a call to sort that out, and we have to do it ourselves because we have lost these ritual processes. And in the heart of all these evil, immature masculine characters that are a facade, they are imposters. They are trying to fill the space of men in a somewhat manless world, and they are desperately trying to imitate that, but it has gone amok, or it has gone wrong. And in the center of all of these negative aspects of males, or these negative males themselves, is a wounded boy, an infantile, an extreme vulnerability within them that is causing this. So we should get into the structures and the maps that they have given us. Here are some very interesting diagrams. Now, you'll see on the left there are 8 pyramids. You will see at the very top the king in his fullness, the warrior in his fullness. Underneath those two are the divine child and the hero. Now, these are the immature counterparts of those two archetypes. And the same thing on the bottom. You have the magician and the lover in his fullness. I can't go into each and every one of these in this video because I want to keep it short and sweet, but you can take a moment to look at these, and they're fairly self-explanatory. And I encourage you to go get the book and read it, because it does go into more depth on all of these. And look, I mean, for me personally, it really, like they said, it's a map, and it helps you call out yourself. You know, there's moments in the book when I'm reading that I'm like, fuck, that's something that I do maybe far too often, and I know, and I can feel that it is wrong, but I don't have a North Star, a guiding compass to go the right direction. And that's what this is trying to do, because maybe, and all of these archetypes are working at the same time. It's not that there's one or the other. Like I said, you have all of these, and the goal is to become the most centered, is to try to incorporate and and live out, become centered within all of these, and have a somewhat balance. And this was in primitive cultures, the chieftain of the village or whatever was someone that could embody all of these archetypes to the best possible extent, not just one or the other. Now, of course, we have more people that specialize in these things, but I think in order to reach the highest level in our own fields, we want to become as well versed or as balanced and mature as possible. So you can see on the bottom right there are two pyramids, and these different pyramids represent the archetypal structure of the male psyche. Encased inside of the mature manhood is a smaller pyramid, is the boy psychology. And that's where a lot of people remain through their life. And it's the task that is set out for us now is that we need to find a way to the fullest possible potential. I can think of lots of examples like the tyrant. So of course, for example, the king in his fullness. Now this is an extremely positive archetype. The king, for example, is something that is, I mean, in traditional cultures, the king was someone who could act as a medium, act as a conduit of the divine world of gods, and he could act as a embodied earthly version of that in between his people and the divine. Now, of course, this doesn't always happen, and it can always go wrong like it has in many cases. And kings can become tyrannical, or they become weak and cowardly. So it's important to note that very rarely do we reach these perfect forms and stay there. It's always constantly in flux, and you're going in between these active and passive poles in its negative shadow forms. Maybe we have always lived in infantile societies, and we've always been very infantile as a species. Maybe that's the case, because usually a lot of the examples that I can think of these archetypes are in stories and literature, and it's very rare that us humans can, in the real world, can stay at these perfect levels for very long. But just like in the book Lord of the Flies, where it's the kids alone on the island, we can no longer afford to live in this Lord of the Flies island anymore, because we're not fighting with sticks and rocks. We have so much power at our disposal now, whether it's we just don't have the luxury, whether it's nuclear weapons or advanced AI systems and algorithms, and this almost infinitely complex internet world that seems to have so much effect on our lives now, and propaganda that is so sophisticated and so complicated that we can't even detect that it's there anymore. It's not like in Nazi Germany, where you have a poster that is telling you to think a certain way. We have gone so far beyond that, we don't have the tools to deal with these things currently, psychologically. And there are more and more destructive ideologies popping up across the entire political spectrum that are ripping and tearing down our cultures that have gotten us to this place where we are. And it's not that they're perfect, but we desperately need cohesion in our society. And if we have any hope in stopping that, we might need to grow up. So to finish off with some thoughts, as the old Hermetics believed, the Hermetic philosophies of the ancient Jewish traditions, they believed there was two types of thinking. There was solve and coagule. And solve is the breaking down and separating things into tiny little pieces so we can understand them. This is a lot. And tearing things down into the smallest parts and seeing if everything, why it's there and if it's necessary. And this is kind of what's happened in our culture, especially with postmodern philosophy. We've spent the last few hundred years tearing down, psychologically tearing down and breaking everything we know into little pieces so we can understand it better and ask the question if they're necessary. Now we're at a point where we need to get to this second mode of thinking, coagule, which is a coagulation of bringing them together in cohesion and understanding the things as a whole. And this is where the next renaissance or way of thinking I think we're going to go as a culture is how it's going to happen. Now that we've broken everything down and understood all the individual parts, we can build them back together in a more mature way, in a more understood and articulated way than we did before. Instead of blindly following things like religions, maybe now we can understand them in their entirety at a much higher level as individuals instead of just in groups, to apply them to our own lives. Anyway, I want to finish off with some quotes in the conclusion that the authors have written down. Through the evolutionary process, it has placed these powerful archetypal resources within each man. And it has called upon them in different periods of time and to solve difficult problems in different periods of human history, and to dare the unthinkable, to organize laws out of chaos. And if modern men can take the task of their own initiation of boyhood to manhood as seriously as their tribal ancestors did, then we may witness the end of the beginning of our species instead of the beginning of the end. And with that, I want to bring this video to an end. Thank you to everyone that came along. Go check out the book if you want to understand these things in more detail, or if you want me to go into these topics in more detail, comment down below, and for future videos I can do that. Subscribe, and thank you for watching the video. See you soon.